Hi, I'm Jeff, here with Filmgate Movie Review, and we have with us today...
I'm Jared.
And I'm Seth.
Great. Today we're going to be talking about Steve McQueen, an American icon. It's a documentary film on Steve McQueen, and you may or may not immediately know who that is, but we have some specific reasons why we're talking about this film today and reviewing it as far as content, but also a little bit of excitement just being related to Cedarville University. So anybody else want to...
Yeah, we're from Cedarville, if you don't know that already. And there was two alumni in it. There was Benjamin Bailey and Parker Adams. Parker Adams wrote and edited the film, and I thought it was very well written, and I thought it was edited well as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thought? You knew them. I don't know them.
Parker was my advisee. He's done some great work. He's also done some VFX work and directing work on Woodlawn and War Room. And so this is his kind of third film. It was not a fully featured large release film, was a limited release, but I was really excited to get out there and again just see something he had worked on and have his name almost really top billed credit. So it was really exciting to see that and just his progression, just being out of school for a few years. But more importantly, just the concept of the documentary itself. Steve McQueen is one of those American icons that I think a lot of the younger movie-going generation hasn't really heard about or doesn't know who he is. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that Jared and Seth had no clue who Steve McQueen was before we sat down in that theater, unless they Googled him beforehand. But for me, it was kind of pleasant to see some of the film rights that he had and that I had seen and kind of forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And also, not to get too ahead of myself, but by the end of the flick, I kept seeing him like almost as a little bit of a Daniel Craig from 007. Like some of the profile views, some of the actions that he did, I'm like, whoa, I wonder if he's influenced Daniel Craig, because he would have definitely known who Steve McQueen was. So again, anyway, let's maybe shift gears a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about either the editing of the film, the story itself, how it drew you in, and I'll let one of you two take over.
Okay, well, I'll start with the story. The whole point of the movie, if you don't know, is based on how Steve McQueen, it starts with how he was the king of cool, his whole life, how he was looking for meaning, and it basically wraps up with how he became a Christian in the end. Mm-hmm. So it takes a different take on it than some of the other movies do, which is really important. To start out, it goes with Greg Laurie, and he introduces the film, and what all did he say? Do you guys remember?
It was just, he paralleled his life to Steve McQueen. They both really had one of those terrible childhood stories that you hear about and kind of rose from those ashes to make something of themselves. Greg Laurie is a pastor. He's basically, I don't know his whole life story, but I know that he's dedicated his life to Christ and kind of been in that pastoral ministry field for a while. And Steve McQueen's a different story, where it wasn't until very, very near the end of his life that he kind of made that decision. One of the things that, the narrative that you learn about his life is, he had a rough start, but boy, he had, at a youngish age, young man, basically had everything he could ever want. He was, a top-billed actor, getting paid millions of dollars back in 1960s and 70s money, which would equal even more today. Yeah. And so he had everything he wanted, but everything he did, he had to keep one-upping himself because nothing really met what he was looking for. And I think that was a great thread that they were following throughout the story. But I think Jared had, throughout the story, that was the main thing. There's lots of parts of his life that they talk about, and maybe Jared could pick up on whether he liked the way the film flowed in completeness or not.
I thought it was an interesting film because there was a lot of content and there was a lot to cover about him, because he just went through such dynamic life changes, even from his just growing up, his rise to his first kind of beginning of stardom to being the top of his class and the greatest actor of all time, basically, and then kind of losing all that, and then kind of just falling and finding Jesus. And so that's kind of the progression of the story, and there's just so much content to cover. And so there were certain parts where it was just you couldn't really see how it connected with the main central narrative of that arc, and it kind of got a little I don't know, just it was a little discontinuous in that respect.
Yeah. I felt like it was a little foggy at times. What I'm supposed to. How does this aspect relate to the theme that I know is happening?
Right.
And that was kind of hard to pick out.
Right. I mean, there were certain points when it seemed like the cutting was a little fast, just because it seemed like they had so much content they wanted to cover, which is like, I know when I edit my film, sometimes that happens to me. It's like a lot of cool shots. He's just like cut between them all, and it's hard to make those value judgments of like what is like the essence of what you're getting at. Just because he was such a dynamic character, there was so much to him.
Yeah, they were trying to put. When you think about it this way, they were trying to show somebody who really knew nothing about Steve McQueen and give a whole documentary on him, as well as adding in the whole Christian aspect of it as well, which made it kind of tough to squeeze that all in.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought is that like really, I think there's a lot of, I'm pretty sure, and I've looked it up a little bit, that there's a lot of documentaries out there or information about Steve McQueen and his career in Hollywood and his rise and fall from fame. And the thing that kind of set this documentary apart was after his fall from grace in Hollywood, what happened with his life.
Right.
And I feel like that was actually, it could have been more of the movie. I think they could have skipped over a lot of his relationships that if people are interested in Steve McQueen, you could find out about him having 2 or 3 wives or girlfriends or a mixed match of that. It was kind of confusing. I mean, we talked in the beginning, like they kept showing a picture of this like little boy and I'm like, is that his son? And it turns out like, yes, but they never mentioned it. And he had a daughter that I don't think they ever showed in the whole movie. So again, I don't know all the detail about that, but that was okay. I could still understand who he was and why his life circumstances were happening and what brought him to like understand a need for Christ and things like that. So like, and the fact that, like you said, there's just so much detail to cover in someone's life that I think they could have probably cut a little bit out. But I don't want to totally throw them under the bus on editing because there were some spots that we talked about that I really liked some of the editing and the cuts. There's some, I would say, some segues between major like milestones or acts in his life, and usually they would use this projector type of a setup where it would kind of be transitioning in a shot between the projector and then like the next shot would just seamlessly lead into the next like arc of his life. And I would almost miss the cut. It's just one of those things. There are other, sometimes when TV shows like win awards and things for this, like that's what I was thinking of. Like, wow, I didn't even realize like there was a cut until after it happened. And I'm like, that's great editing. So I think like the actual technical editing of it was pretty good. I think when you're trying to fit in a lot of information, sometimes you get a little speedy or and you just have to try and get more in. But I don't want to totally throw editing under the bus. I don't want to throw Parker under the bus. He did a great job. But I think that there was a lot to fit in, but there was still room for some of the creativity that he did. I mean, even the cinematography, there's a lot of photo, like motion photo work, which I thought was really, I felt it helped the film. Because there's not a ton of footage of Steve McQueen in the film, like other than from movie clips. So I think it was about halfway through that I realized, I'm like, they really haven't had a lot of like interview footage with Steve. Like, oh wait, this is the 60s and 70s. They didn't really do that. So
it wasn't a thing.
Really everything is being driven by these like motion pictures and interviews with other people and not Steve McQueen. So I don't know. I didn't even think about that until like later on. So I don't know. As far as like who was in it, anybody want to kind of break down some of the interesting people that you got to see and hear from and maybe how they impacted Steve impacted their life or he impacted theirs?
Sure, yeah. One of the first ones and the bigger ones was Barbara Minty McQueen, which was his final wife. The third one, I believe it was. He had 3. And then there was Mel Gibson, which one of the key things they showed when they were advertising this was Mel Gibson was going to be in it, which he played a big part. A lot of interview scenes talking about Steve McQueen's life, stuff like that. And then we had stuntman Stan Beret. And he was also a Christian at that time who met with McQueen and kind of talked to him through his life. Then we had McQueen biographer Marshall Terrell, and then actors Barbara Lay and Mel Novak. And Barbara Lay was another one of his wives, I believe.
Wives or close girlfriends, yes.
And then Greg Laurie, the pastor, who introed it and was on the rear end on the altar call. And yeah, that was about it.
So anything like pop out at you, like, I don't know, from like stuff that you heard from like Mel Gibson or the biographer that like were like just interesting tidbits about how they influenced them or impacted their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think even Mel Gibson, like as he was just talking about Steve McQueen, you could see like a little bit of like his childness come out, and like it's like, oh man, like that was like his hero growing up, you know what I mean? Because he was the king of cool, and that was like the thing to like, I don't know, like and it's always cool to see like how someone can be portrayed and how a character can be created and inspire people to like believe in something that's like, I guess, like, you know, not even necessarily what the person actually was,
Yes.
but exactly, but like what the story of the character that was made holds that message, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I like that because Mel Gibson, like, obviously he was like a hero to Mel Gibson in the acting career. And, you know, he just had all these great things to say about it. But the biographer we hear from talks about how really, you know, Steve McQueen was acting his whole life, and then in the background, he was nothing like what people thought he was, and that was one of the big struggles that he had. And so I thought that was really, really interesting as far as just looking at the character of who everybody thinks someone is. And we have the same, I think, problem today with our current celebrityism, we see like whatever the media portray them as, and imagine, like I imagine Chris Pratt as Star-Lord or the guy from Jurassic World, and like that's how he is every day, you know, like that's probably nothing like the guy, and you know, and it's just because we see them kind of typecast for a while, and Steve McQueen was definitely an action hero, an action star, and you kind of see them as this big masculine hero, and when that breaks down, that's when, you know, celebrities have big breakdowns and fallouts like Steve McQueen did, and then, you know, how they recover, what do they search for, what do they do, and that's where I feel, for me, the film got really interesting is once he had all these millions of dollars and he basically had his dream project that flopped. Everything basically, he lost everything, it was his dream, he was a failure in it, and like his second marriage broke down or whatever, and then like he's like left with nothing and he becomes kind of like a weird recluse. But in that stage, that's where he kind of, again, like inadvertently ran across God. And again, I think it was a great way to say someone who is a major star that has it all together and then loses it all, you know, God can still find people like that and have, even at the last bit of their life, make a difference in their lives, which they can then echo into eternity based upon things like this, that, you know, people are watching this and learning a little bit about Steve McQueen they maybe never did. So for me, that was just as I think a believer in the field of media, watching this was encouraging for me. I don't know if you've thought about that or not, but not everyone gets to have the massive voice of like a star actor or director, or even Steve McQueen wasn't saved until he was like near the end of his life.
He was about 49,
and he died at 50. And that's something where I think even all these years later, who knows the impact that the fact that he changed his life and was trying to make a slight difference, how that can change people's lives today. So that's something I think with media, because we have this archive of media history and it's interesting, people like to watch it, I think that's really interesting. So I don't know, I have one more gear I want to talk about, but I don't want us to like just...
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of bouncing off that, like the salvation story was the coolest part for me. I think even like how he got saved, he basically wanted to start flying. And it was almost his way of escape. He always loved like riding motorcycles, racing cars. He was a race car driver. He did tons of stunts. He did all of his own stunts. So the guy was just like a physical action kind of guy. That's why it translated so well on the screen. That's why everybody loved him. Is because that's just who he was. And so flying was like that one thing he hadn't really done yet. And so he's kind of like, well, might as well try it. And as he's learning to fly, he meets this pilot who's teaching him. And he kind of becomes like a father figure to him, and he ends up having the opportunity to share the gospel with him, and like that's how Steve McQueen had the opportunity to get saved, and he does get saved. And it's like, to me, that was just like the coolest thing, because like it's so cool to see how like God will use like every character. You know, like that man was serving faithful in his small little community of like was it Idaho or
no,
it was or was it California?
It was California.
Okay,
it was like small little like airport.
Yeah, it was like some small little airport in California, and this guy's just been faithfully serving in his church. He wasn't a pastor, he wasn't anything. He just like lived his faith. And then in comes Steve McQueen, and he has the opportunity just to minister him, and God totally used that guy's life to change somebody's life that is like larger than life. And then through Steve McQueen, like Steve McQueen was able to like give so much money to like people who like. I'm pretty sure they talk about a story of like someone who needed a car that just broke down. He'd just go and buy him a car. And like,
or the kid that had like, he read about in the newspaper that was having like a hard time or went through something with his family, and they sent their whole family to Disney.
Exactly. Yeah, things like that. Yeah, and like he just did those things because that came out of the goodness of his heart, because of a faithful person was following the Lord. You know what I mean? And so like God totally uses everybody in like his grand narrative, and that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, I think even like Stan Barrett, and there was one other guy that's not listed right here on my build cast, but his friend from the industry, an associate actor, was saying like he was able to see the change, and it wasn't just that it was a change in attitude, but it was a change in who he was, and that made a marked impact on him. And that's what we know Christ can do to people. Yeah. And so it's just interesting whenever you see someone who does have that celebrity status make a true I would say a true conversion of like a life change, actually being redeemed and going back and having, not just forgiveness of your sins, but turning from it and accepting Christ. That's something where we all know it changes who you are. You are a new man, a new person. And when people see that, that's, again, exactly why I think anybody in the realm of like media, broadcast journalism, that has like even like a slight footprint in that can have such reverberating effects in like the industry and the public eye and things like that. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah.
Anything you want to bring up, Seth? Are you kind of?
Yeah, one of the big things that I never knew that was really kind of cool there, the airport guy that taught him how to fly that led him there, but then Billy Graham. He had a, that was crazy
cool.
to me.
Yeah, I forget
Yeah, well, that's Steve McQueen. Oh, by the way, Billy Graham. Like,
exactly,
what?
they just dropped him like, whoa then. So apparently, Steve McQueen later in his life, once he was trying to get saved and figuring out more about it, he ended up contacting his pastor of the church he went to, who had connections to Billy Graham. So Billy Graham eventually came and visited Steve McQueen and read him through the scripture, answered a lot of his questions, even gave him his personal Bible that he was preaching from. And so that was a big thing for Steve McQueen. Even on his deathbed, they said, wasn't he holding it when he died?
Yeah. Well, I think he visited him like really near like the last surgery that he had.
Yeah, 2 days I think it was before.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. But that was, I did not know that. That was completely unexpected. I'm just like, Bill?
And Billy Graham.
Yeah, nobody talks about that.
But it's kind of weird because you've got this guy who's kind of, people know who he is, but by this time he's been out of movies for a while. And obviously I would say just assuming Billy Graham is probably not an avid moviegoer. Yeah, I could be wrong. But just, this guy is saying, look, I've got this guy that would really love to talk to you. I mean, kudos to Billy Graham of making time to not just be someone, again, just this little movie snippet, not just be someone who's preaching to thousands upon thousands of people, but also willing to invest in the one person who he, probably God alerted him, like, you need to invest in this person, and the difference that it makes. It's just amazing. Like, it's great to have, like just a single person impact or saving 1,000 people. You've still, had an impact on a soul for forever. I think it just shows that importance that this could have. So, we can always come back to this if we want, but for me, because I am a little older than you, probably 10, 12 years older than you, I grew up watching AMC, so American Movie Classics, which now is kind of known for Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead. But in my day, it was known for like old movies. Like I would watch all the classics and things like that. So I'd seen a bunch of Steve McQueen movies because my mom had AMC playing all the time in the background. So I'd seen, Bullet, I'd seen The Great Escape, probably part of Le Mans, a lot of these things that they were showing in the video. So for me, it was kind of like a walk down memory lane. So if you happen to be watching this and you're in your 30s and you actually know what some of those movie titles are, it's going to even make it more worth it to maybe looking into how you can access or watch this film, because it takes someone who those were some really iconic movies, some of, I would say, the classic greats, and it's just really interesting to see the life behind one of the main actors in those, and then how someday I might get to see that guy in heaven. After I'm in line for, Jesus, Daniel, Joseph, all these other people, Steve McQueen. I'm gonna get there now. So it's cool. Now, after I see Jared there, whatever. So, but anyway.
Am I gonna beat you there?
No. This is like years into eternity. So we're all good. But I just think it's really cool, for me, just to kind of walk through that and to see even when they had the movie posters flying by of a portion, that wasn't his whole career, but a portion, how many things he was in was astounding. How did you have that much time? But so for me, it wasn't just that he was just an action hero icon. He was the guy that everybody wanted to be, and he did it all and wasn't content until he found God. And so for me, that's something that I hope people will discover as they watch through this, on maybe on Netflix or Amazon or on Discovery Channel or A&E, wherever it ends up later on. I'm really hoping that kind of shines through and that people will have their conscience pricked in that, because it's a good concept. So.
Yeah, I would agree. So yeah, the movie, it's a great story about redemption of Steve McQueen and kind of about how God lifted him up and was able to use him, even a superstar. So yeah, it's cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Visual effects were amazing. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So we'll see you then.